All right, good people, a new book that is out this year on Pluto Press called Let Them Eat Crypto, the blockchain scam that's ruining the world. Its author, Pete Howson, joins us this morning. Pete, good to meet you. Welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. Congratulations on the publication.
Mm-hmm. What's up, Pete?
Can you hear us?
Thanks, Lowe's, for reading it. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. We might be on a little. I think we're on there's some sort of lag there, but we do hear you. But so I'll be clear, Geechee. I can't speak for you. I just and Pete, just so we're and everybody. What I have read is the intro. Okay, yeah, I think we're on some sort of lag. Okay. All right, let me give him a second to see if he can fix that. What I have read, Geechee, is the intro, chapter, I believe 6 on crypto colonialism, and then the last chapter. I forgot the chapter 7. So I think that's chapters 6 and 7, right? Mm-hmm. No. I've read the introduction, chapter 2, the crypto colonists, and then chapter 7, a world without Web3. So those I can't claim to have read the entire book. But I did read those 3 chapters, and I think there's plenty for us to dive into. Pete, were you able to hear that, and are you able to hear me now?
I can hear you. You're not so bad. It's my crappy university computer that doesn't do very well at anything. But can you hear me all right?
I hear you okay. Yeah. I think it's working all right. I think we might be a little lagged, but let me just so I don't know if you heard what I was saying about how much of the book I've read. The introduction, chapter 2 and chapter 7. So I haven't read every page, but I have read those 3 chapters and have a lot that I want to ask you about. But let you take the first step of giving us your broad summary of the book and the work, and maybe a little bit of the background you bring to it, and what led you there, because I think that story itself seems fascinating. What led you to write this book?
Yeah, so my name is Pete Howson. I'm a assistant professor in international development at Northumbria University in Newcastle in the UK. So I guess the journey to write this book, it started about 8 years ago when I left the UK, moved to a swamp forest in Indonesia, in Borneo, Kalimantan. I was working with some indigenous communities looking to try and make their forests more valuable standing than cut down for timber and palm oil. And they were using a system of carbon credits to try and monetize their resources without having to obviously cut them down. And I came across a cryptocurrency project, which was just next door, as it happened, also in Kalimantan, the Rimbaraya Red Plus project, it was called. And their plan was to sell carbon credits as a cryptocurrency token on global markets. So people in the global north, if they wanted to buy a pair of trainers and they felt bad about that, they could just buy a couple of these carbon credits. And then the money-like things would zoom across the internet straight into the crypto wallets of these indigenous people in Indonesia. That was the plan. And I was fooled by this in some respect, because I actually thought that this could really solve a lot of problems. I thought that it would cut out all of these greedy intermediaries, the people that were like these third-party validators that were coming in and sucking up all of the excess profit, and it could actually, empower local people. It didn't work. It was a scam, and so the book doesn't start looking at carbon trading. Chapter 4, I think, I look at carbon credits in a bit more detail. But I guess this book really was meant to be like my atonement, because I was a bit of a booster for many years. I'd written quite impactful journal articles trying to say that blockchain cryptocurrency could fix all these problems. And I think, policy decisions were made on that basis. So this book was trying to basically say, oh, please just ignore everything I've said. It was all wrong. So I'm trying to basically unstitch all the elements to this scam, and how it's still being pushed by some very powerful people to try and keep taxmen and regulators off their back.
Well, speaking of that,
in the UK and in the US, it goes right to the very top. The highest authorities in the land.
So if I can, let me ask one more broad question to that point, and then Geechee, I'll turn it over to you before re-engaging, so to speak. But Pete, you say here in chapter 7, you sort of as you're concluding or heading towards your conclusion, you say cryptocurrencies are terrible. And then you go on to say that Bitcoin was never an anti-imperialist technology. A point that was somehow, Bitcoin was never an anti-imperialist technology that was somehow co-opted by free market fundamentalists. Bitcoin and blockchain were designed for and by right-wing anarcho-capitalist libertarians to weaken democratic government, end quote. Could you talk a little bit about what led you to that conclusion and some of the players that you focus on in the book that demonstrate the point that, again, this technology was never some anti-imperialist technology and was always designed for right-wing anarcho-capitalist libertarians to weaken democracy?
Yeah, well, I'll start at the beginning. So blockchain Bitcoin is often hailed as this very innovative technology. It's actually what I claim is an illusion of innovation. Actually, most of the elements to this have been around for decades. So block time stamping, the simplified hashing algorithm that Bitcoin uses, that's been around since the 70s. So this is essentially just old technology that had been pulled together to fix this made-up problem. And they did this because in 2009, the dawn of the financial crisis, everyone's pissed off with the bankers. They're pissed off with the bankers not because they're greedy bankers. They're pissed off with bankers because they've colluded with government, and the government have been printing money in order to bail out the banks. Bitcoiners, crypto people, they love banks. They love free market neoliberalism. That's I just went black, but you can still hear me, can't you?
Yeah, we see you too.
See and hear you. Yep.
You can. Okay,
There's just a little delay. Yeah.
Just start waving if you can't see me anymore. Right. So the cypherpunks were these underground network of, you could think of them as sort of hooded hacktivists, if you like, but they probably didn't operate like that. They were all very economic right-wing people. They were also referred to as high-tech Hayekians because most of them were devout followers of Friedrich Hayek. This idea that any intervention by the state in the smooth operating of free markets is a slippery slope to serfdom. So they tried to come up with this sort of algorithmic fix to combat the sticky fingers of the state trying to meddle in the banks, which was Bitcoin. And one of the prominent cypherpunks was this guy, Julian Assange. And I think, like, if you're like me, you can connect your own politics to this guy, in terms of like data activism, and we want the US government not to murder Reuters journalists in Iraq. We can all look at these collateral murders tapes and feel some affinity to his cause. But this guy is one of the masterminds behind the early Bitcoin movement and the cypherpunks generally. And I think there is this sort of mistake that people make where they kind of connect their own politics with people like Julian Assange. The Sci-Hub platform, I don't know if that's a big thing in the US, but it's quite big in the UK. Even our own students use Sci-Hub as a way of sort of breaking down barriers to paywalled academic writing. And like Democracy Now, they solicit for donations using Bitcoin. We can connect our politics to these people. And I think for that reason, lots of people say that that is the underlying politics of this technology. But in reality, I think the Bitcoin blockchain, it has more in common with the Tea Party movement than it did with Occupy or Anonymous. And essentially, I think when you look under the hood and actually what is going on with these blockchain cryptocurrency platform is that they are furthering the interests of people who benefit from a very right-wing politics, not an emancipatory people that want to bring down like neoliberal governments. So yeah, I mean, the final chapter looks at this in a lot more detail, how all of that is rubbish. Like there is no emancipatory potential that comes from this technology. And you've talked about this before. There's a lot of your ideas peppered in, you probably noticed, suitably acknowledged.
I did. Honestly, I did, and I appreciate it. And I was wondering if you, and I'm sorry, Geechee, but just because, let me just stop. We can come back to that. Go ahead, Geechee. Let me just take a break.
No, so I appreciate opening up the book. You kind of dealt with people's who are into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies critique of like, oh, you just don't know what you're talking about, you're ignorant, and the fact that you've actually have a history in it, promoted it, and then corrected yourself. But I'm curious to hear, do you see any success in other countries? Maybe talk about Akon's attempt and El Salvador and other places, but have you seen anything that's remotely successful in terms of crypto, Bitcoin, or whatever?
Oh, he gets all of this. He details all of it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You picked. Yeah, you picked.
He did it on
really
purpose. Geechee is an expert interviewer.
Studies
that was on purpose.
So yeah, I mean, generally speaking, like cryptocurrencies, you will find that they are a marker for desperation. They're never a marker for like people using them because they're the best solution to anything. Because you could, people use Bitcoin where there's also people who are selling their kidneys in order to feed their kids. Like that's generally, you'll see that these two things play out in the same places. It's not that people, we hear these stories from Bitcoin Magazine and Coin Telegraph, whatever, will play these sort of flashy documentaries on their YouTube channel to suggest that in Bitcoin cryptocurrencies are lifting people out of poverty in Central America or something. That's absolute nonsense. Like the only time you would use any form of cryptocurrency really, other than a form of speculation, is if you really have to get around government sanctions evasion, tax evasion, fraud. That's the only real use case for any of this. You use it because you have to, and there's no other way. So, I mean, that's generally speaking. But I mean, like, whenever you drill down to it, in my recent writing that I've started progressing after the book, really, I've tried to think about this as like scam space. I'm a geographer. My PhD was in geography, so I'm interested in the way that the cryptocurrencies and blockchain, the way they manifest in particular places, so like the concrete aspects to this technology. And when you go to, for example, if you were to go to Senegal, maybe I should do a bit of background to Akon, this project, first before I actually get into the sort of grounded.
Yeah, please go into that, because you call it
about
you call it
5,
Akon City,
6 years
Wakanda,
ago,
in fact.
No, yeah, that's right. So, a half Senegalese, half American rapper. Is he a rapper? He's he did Smack That. I don't know if that's like R&B. I don't want to offend anyone with my sort of.
I mean, you can actually throw him anywhere. You could throw him anywhere.
Genres, but right. So he came up with this idea that that you could build this city in Senegal, not far from the capital. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And so he went to the government of Senegal and he said, can I have some land? I want to build this crypto city that runs on cryptocurrency, which I'm going to build, called Acoin, after myself. And all the buildings are going to look like fancy thing, the Marvel comic Black Panther. It's going to have in it all of these elements of Afrofuturism, this sort of aesthetic that sort of implies that in this future city we'd have transcended all Black civil rights problems, and this is going to be a sort of wonderful utopian city. The Senegalese government, they evicted all of poor fishing communities to make way for where this is going to sit. They laid the foundation stone, had a big ceremony. It's during COVID, so they've all got the masks on and everything. When you go to that spot now, the only thing that's there is that same stone which they laid in that ceremony, and with I think it's got a poster on it that sort of shows what this future Wakanda place is going to look like. So it was a scam. I mean, the price of Acoin rocketed, but that was the only thing that went up. No buildings or anything like that. This was purely, and this is why I refer to it as scam space. Like the materiality of it doesn't actually ever come to anything. They're just sort of using space, land, to facilitate this scam, but no development, no assistance for local people ever happens. I mean, the crazy thing is that before, when it was all out in the open that this was never going to happen, he'd managed to convince the Ugandan government to do exactly the same thing, to donate money for Wakanda too. Land, resources, people evicted, all of these things in order to make way for this. So, I mean, and then you've got people saying, oh yeah, it's emancipatory, it's empowering all these poor folks. And it's like, it's when you go to these places and you see that there's nothing like that. So Bitcoin City, you mentioned El Salvador, very similar. Like whenever they say on their interviews or in their press releases or anything, as soon as they say Bitcoin B symbol visible from space, you can instantly say, oh, it's not happening, then it's just rubbish. Like you're making it up. Because and they all have this. They all have this sort of symbolic element to it to try and attract people into effectively what is an affinity fraud. It's like, oh, you've got to get your head around this sort of cult-like mentality that a lot of these sort of crypto people have. But generally, they prey on those people who've invested all their life savings into this token or whatever, and they say that, like, you've bought into this mind, body, and soul. Now come and live it in reality. Jump into the Mary Poppins pavement painting and actually sort of experience life with other like-minded people in these environments. And in reality, there's nothing there. It's just nonsense. It's fairy tale. Like the El Salvador Bitcoin City scam, that was actually a master plan that was put together by the Chinese government for a charter city in the Gulf of Fonseca in El Salvador. And all Nayib Bukele did, the president of El Salvador, is take this, dust it off, right, Bitcoin B, that'll do. And then, submitted it to whoever's signing it off. And you go there now, nothing. All they've done is cleared the space where it's going to be of people, so people believe that development is going to happen. Build a power station, which isn't connected to anything, and then you just it was quietly mothballed. They have mothballed it. They've come out in the open now and said that this isn't going to happen. So there's and I'd love to say that there is an example where it has happened in a way, because I think it would be a good it would be a horrible place, no doubt. It would be a dystopic nightmare, but it would be good just to see how this has happened. But however large or grandiose or small these promises are, they always tend to be, they are always scams, and there's nothing that ever gets developed.
So in fact, you say,
I'll try and chuck in some jokes and things, because this gets a bit dark and down.
No. I mean, but I think that's important, because the mythology is powerful. But you say at one point, and I wanted you to expand on this and maybe to elaborate and maybe give some detail as to how this exactly does or does not work. But you say in the book, the iron law of blockchain. When someone says you can solve X with blockchain, they don't understand X, and you can ignore them. But could you talk about why that iron law is in fact true, and how in fact it does work to not work? In other words, could you explain the process that evolves or devolves into the con, to make it as plain as possible, just to help break through some of the defensiveness that you write about has been built up over time by so much of a propagandized effort.
Yeah, so I mean, these aren't my words. The iron law of blockchain. This comes from Nicholas Weaver, who's a law professor at Harvard, I think. But before I had really changed my tune. But I mean, yeah,
Pete, I'm wondering.
I don't think the book, to be honest, does a good enough job in.
Pete, I'm just gonna. I want to interrupt to see if we can try something real quick and see if we could try having you turn off your camera, and if that helps with the lag, so that we could, because now the audio is getting chopped up a little bit, and I want to at least see if we can get people to hear you. So I'm wondering if we can give that a shot, and then have you continue with the answer, because I don't think much of it was heard. And now I'm just trying to there we go. But can I now why can't I unmute you again? There you go. Now, did he mute himself? There we go. Okay, good. Go.
No, I'm back, I think.
Okay, good. Yeah, let's try that.
Does it sound clearer?
It sounds fine, and I think we're without a lag too.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think it's. Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, let's fix that then.
No.
Yeah, so Nicholas Weaver, this professor at Harvard, he, for a couple of years ago, coined this term, the iron law of blockchain. Not me. But I mean, I fully agree with it. But I think in the book, I don't do a good enough job of unpicking the scam aspect from these promises. Or maybe I do. Maybe I'm being hard on myself. But for example, when you have a blockchain developers, they say, oh, I know how we can fix obesity in the UK for the government-run healthcare system. We're going to have an app, and we're going to incentivize people to walk more. And the more they walk, the more of these walkie coins. I don't even think they gave them a good name beyond that. They're called like walkie coins or something. And when people get these walkie coins, they can trade them in for some cake or something like that, like something that, an incentive that obese people like or something. So you look at this and you think like, well, obviously you just do not understand the nature of the problem that you're professing to sort of trying to fix. But I think in reality, they do understand the nature of the problem. They just know that it's just fixing the problem is not what they're trying to do. They're trying to make lots of money. And we know the best way to do that is to get people to invest in some stupid make-believe homemade internet money, and buy those tokens, and the blockchain developers get obscenely wealthy, or at least the early investors do, while everyone else gets rug pulled and loses everything. And I have not come across any examples where this isn't the case. Like, it's not like I'm just cherry picking some of the crappy examples. Like, there are no good ones. At least I mean, if anyone has found one where they think they're like, oh no, this doesn't follow this standard rug pull trajectory, everyone got what they wanted out of this project, then please, email me. Let's have a look at this. But I haven't found any yet. Even the ones that say, like, our goal is to facilitate a degrowth economy within this sort of small kind of left-wing group of people or something. And there's actually a project called Fair Co-op that have tried to do this in Spain. I mean, even then, even when the guy hates capitalists, Enric Duran, activists there, actually robbed banks before, to try and set this project up, like those capitalist scumbags. But even then, you still get people that realize that they can make a hell of a lot of money by just rug pulling their own token and doing a runner, which has happened then. And I think this is what I've tried to suggest. There's no difference between dog coins and degrowth coins. It's just the logo. Other than that, they're all identical, and they all follow exactly the same rug pull fraud trajectory. And they're all, I mean, let's not, I don't know, should we get started on wash trading and market manipulation already? Is that sort of,
I mean, Geechee, I know has go. Yeah. Well, I don't know that go ahead, Geechee, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, quickly, so around here we normally talk about how wealth that's built, particularly in America, is through violence, public policy, or fraud. So I wonder how you quickly explain crypto and Bitcoin as it relates to that, and then also kind of get into the chapter and your thoughts about what is it, the crypto colonists. Could you kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, well, I think this is something that I've heard you guys talk about, the first part of your question. I mean, you do have these blockchain developers that try to suggest that we could deploy this technology in order to create fairer markets so that poor Black communities can compete alongside their white counterparts on a level playing field. And often it's people from those same communities that are proposing and promoting these tokens. But the starting point is off, like as you said, Jared, in the myth of Black capitalism, that it proposed that solution suggests that their white counterparts got rich from playing the game politely. They didn't. They did it through violence and pinching other people's stuff, which is exactly what crypto people tend to do as well. And I think, I mean, that leads us on to the second part of your question around this sort of crypto colonial mindset. And it is the mindset aspect of it that's interesting. It's not necessarily the sort of traditional modes of like colonial plunder that's playing out with a lot of these projects, although you do see that. So, for example, Puerto Rico, after Hurricane Maria in 2017, 2018, they set up these zones of opportunity which would offer tax breaks to US businesses to come set up shop in Puerto Rico. They wouldn't pay any tax. They would have like incentives for them to buy property down there. And the purpose of doing that was that they would bring their businesses with them, actually produce stuff in Puerto Rico and give jobs to local people and support development, get Puerto Rico back on its feet. In this, as opposed to accepting sort of federal money so they could actually rebuild stuff and help the local people that have lost everything. But what happened instead is that crypto people, led mainly by Brock Pierce. You know him?
At least a little bit, but it was good. Yeah,
in the book quite
and
often.
It was good to read about. Yeah, and it was good to read more about him in your work for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so Brock Pierce, he's this sort of child Disney actor turned cryptocurrency developer. He was a very early investor in Bitcoin and other fork projects of Bitcoin, and also in Tether. And Tether is a very murky beast that I think deserves its own book. And there's probably people writing a book on this already as we speak. But so this guy Brock Pierce, he assembles his entourage of people to go and build this Bitcoin utopia in Puerto Rico, because he makes the point that if you do crypto as a job, as if your profession is trading crypto, every time you make a trade and you win even a small profit on that trade, you have to declare it. It becomes we have a very different tax system in the UK, so I don't really fully understand it, but it becomes you have to declare it in your tax return for that year. It becomes impossible for you to be a trader because these people, especially the super dodgy ones, they use high frequency trading algorithms, and they are operating over thousands of these different cryptocurrency projects. So I mean, he makes the point is you can go set up shop in Puerto Rico, become a tax resident down there, and you never have to declare anything. So Puerto Rico has turned into this haven, this mecca for all of these crypto investors. They've bought up all the local beachfront property for cheap, created gated communities so that local people can't access any of this new infrastructure that's going up. The local people who've been priced out, because of gentrification problems and everything, they're leaving at a speed that's really scarred by colonialism generally. It's somewhere that's had been used as a firing range for the US Navy to test out Agent Orange and things. They had the gag laws there, so it became illegal for you to protest against the US colonization. They had all the poor people had to submit to vasectomies and being having their kids taken off them because they were just seen as poor because there was something biologically wrong with them. So these are people that have always had this sort of really sort of nefarious relationship with the US, and then suddenly all these people are coming down and just exacerbating that. And these aren't good people. These are the worst criminal scumbags you can think of that are going down there and not being good to the locals. Like you've got people like who's that guy with the drinks, Prime Energy drinks. Do you have that in the US? I can't remember his name. Logan Paul. Logan Paul,
Logan,
his name.
Jake and Logan Paul. Yeah.
Jake and Paul. Right. So there's they're filming themselves driving down the beach in their beach buggies, running over all these baby turtles and everything, and they're live streaming it on Facebook. Like, oh, come down to Puerto Rico, it's brilliant. Bring your Bitcoin. These people are shooting dogs that happen to disturb them whilst they're playing golf. They've and then they return to their gated communities and carry on life that way. And I think so that's a very sort of traditional, you could argue, a traditional form of colonialism. But I mean, there are these other ones as well, where as I say, like the scam space occurs as part of these affinity frauds. You have desperate governments like Vanuatu or Fiji that are selling golden passports so they can get criminals to come with their ill-gotten gains and set up shop in these places. Vanuatu actually quite recently had their visa waiver agreements all cut from EU countries because they dished out so many of these golden passports to criminals. And it's obviously local Vanuatu people who are going to just be super pissed off with that idea. I think it is like it's over half of the country's income came from the sale of these golden passports. Much of those was to crypto scumbags. And like you can see this play out in El Salvador as well. Like it was a couple of days ago, I saw that this arms and drugs dealer had been sent to was due to be sent to America to face trial, but Nayib Bukele gave him a full pardon and just let him walk. Like these countries are trying to encourage the worst kind of criminals to their country, through Bitcoin in order to bring ill-gotten gain. I'm not saying Vanuatu and was to that extent. I mean, that definitely, I think that was the case with El Salvador. There's lots of evidence for that, but which is in the book.
So real quick, let me get to this one bar that you have in this book. And
I mean,
if you can hear me, once you respond,
you've got some places like the X2 community where they were all going to come there. They were going to set up this series of interconnected floating spars, and they were going to build this what they called a Lofstrom loop, which is this basically a catapult to send vehicles into space. Right? They hadn't asked Thailand. They won't say, "Oh, do you mind if we do this or whatever?" They literally just saw this floating thing. They think, "Oh, I'll have that." It's this utter, terra nullius mindset that colonists always have had. It's that, if it isn't mine, it's free for the taking. And we've seen that in Ethiopia with Cardano setting up shop, experimenting with their cryptocurrency when you've got this war in Tigray going on. I'd love to say that I'm just cherry picking the worst of it, but it's like, honestly, I think I'm just scraping at the surface, and I still have never come across somewhere that hasn't resulted in these outcomes.
So just quickly, Rob, I will invite you up on the stage when we finish with our interview here, and I'll prolong the show so you can take every chance to lay out your argument and demonstrate you understand mine and can defend yours. So don't go anywhere. Yeah. Don't leave.
Rob and Adam.
All of them. I'll stay. Yeah. I got time. We'll stay. But to give Pete his due, and I'll encourage you read his book, because to the point Pete was just making, there he covers more than we're covering here, and including the Central African Republic and other parts of Africa, to make the point that it's not there is nowhere, again, this is not a cherry picked. And it's not based on the downturn either. So it's based on a logic and a mindset and a history of exploitation that crypto just plugs itself into. So I think that's very important in the work. And then, by the way, but one name I did want you to talk a little bit about, Pete, was that we've talked about here on the platform. Otherwise, that comes up. Well, two really. Because one, I didn't know about Milton Friedman's son, which was interesting, and then you also mentioned Peter Thiel, and which both represent this, for me, the most horrific in worldview analysis, neoliberalism, neocolonialism, politics. But could you talk about how they factor into your argument around around crypto and blockchain?
Yeah, so Friedman and Thiel together, they jointly set up the Seasteading Institute. Thiel has always been, he was part of the PayPal mafia, and he became a very early adopter in Bitcoin as well. He's been involved, like Andreessen Horowitz, in pretty much every significant step in the evolution of the internet. So, this guy's a very powerful person, even outside of crypto, but especially in crypto. Thiel Peter Thiel I'm talking about. He was one of the first investors in Facebook, so he sort of he's put together a lot of this thinking around the metaverse mindset and things as well. But Thiel, yeah, I mean, he's also a very right-wing guy. Like he's supported a lot of right-wing candidates Republican candidates during the election, and you know he's a real diehard libertarian, you know, cyber libertarian, really, where he just thinks that like all problems, really, any form of government can be deferred to tech solutions. And one of the things that he's talking about is sort of like how the government, they prevent human flourishing in that they put these red tape in the way so they can't develop new biotech solutions, new forms of prisons. And you know, Thiel has always, with a lot of the projects that I talk about in the book, he's just gone and done it wherever he can, like wherever he can escape the purview of governments, and you know, experiment with these new governance solutions that don't involve a government. He's given it a go. So one of the probably the best example of this is Prospera in Honduras. So again, Honduras has suffered immensely from colonial forces in the past. There was just about 10 years ago, several thousand people were murdered after land was cleared to make way for these charter cities that the previous president had set up. This law essentially that meant that foreign companies could come in and set up these cities and not face any regulation from the government there. And Thiel obviously loved it and set up a city called Prospera. And his plan was to allow for these new forms of biotech experiments. So you could go there, you can get biohacked and be pumped full of like drugs like prostatin, which gives you sort of comedically huge muscles. And in the US, obviously, if you wanted to do any sort of gene editing or any of that sort of thing, you'd have to have this sort of exacting gaze of the regulator on your shoulder, making sure that you didn't kill anyone. Prospera don't get rid of all of that. Just give it a go. Prospera, I mean, there've been a lot of pushback in Prospera, where the new Honduran president have tried to kick them out. And Prospera have taken the government to international arbiter, and they've sued the government for $11 billion. And this is a very poor country, and $11 billion is a lot of money. So Prospera have won that case, and the Hondurans have just backed down and said, "Okay, carry on." Like this just shows how, you know, the sort of awful people these people are. And essentially, this all goes back to the same kind of mentality that the homesteaders had, you know, just like they call themselves the seasteaders deliberately, because they're trying to say that this is just like the plains of America were empty, even though they were full of indigenous people. That's how they see the other people's land in the context of these new crypto cities. You know, just it's genocide and all these other bad things, but for the greater good, you know, just so we could have these libertarian new character that pops up a lot, not because I'm deliberately targeting that person.
I missed a little bit there. Pete, I unfortunately I feel like we're losing some of the connection here. If it's Geechee, did you have anything you wanted to raise? And maybe we can ask Pete to close out with a response to it, because I feel like we're struggling a little bit. Maybe we can try again another time.
Yeah,
no, it's all good. Yeah, go ahead.
So there was a line that I really appreciated when you was talking about Muhammad Yunus, and you talked about his love or his neoliberal dream of helping the unbanked entrepreneurs to thrive in a dog dog-eat-dog world of global capitalism. And then obviously you talked about like the disastrous returns on these type of loan recipients. So kind of speak to this entrepreneurial capacity within this kind of crypto world.
Yeah, so Muhammad Yunus, like he basically originally coined this idea of banking the unbanked. So it being banked, like having access to traditional finance, is often framed these days as like a human right, equivalent to sort of having access to clean water, and perhaps even more so. You know, lots of people have said that having access to clean water isn't a human right, but access to traditional finance is. But and this, you know, Muhammad Yunus was really the guy who kicked this all off with his microfinance initiatives. Back in the 1980s, he set up the Grameen Bank, and basically it was this idea that if you don't need to have charities that are building dependence between poor people in the global south and rich people that are constantly having to donate resources to them. You could just give them access to traditional modes of finance, and then they could sort themselves out on their own, you know, have independence. And you know, all of the big aid agencies and you know, the UN General Assembly, they declared 2005 the International Year of Microfinance before they gave Muhammad Yunus a Nobel Prize. You know, they really thought this guy was onto something, but really all he was doing was mainstreaming loan sharking, essentially. You know, this stuff ended horribly. There was a suicide epidemic in Bangladesh and India and other places where Grameen Bank were operating, just because people just couldn't repay these extortionate loans. So it doesn't have a good history. And then crypto people have come along, obviously, with their, you know, a blockchain can fix anything mentality. And they've suggested that we can have banking the unbanked using cryptocurrencies, you know, if people don't have access to a bank account. This is all nonsense, of course, because you need to have a bank account to have a crypto wallet generally. And there, you know, there's projects like the one in South Africa, the one in Mossel Bay in Cape Town, where people have gone there, and instead of banking the unbanked, they've just unbanked people entirely in order to build dependency on Bitcoin. So they've sort of given them these stamping kits so they could stamp their seed phrases, you know, their crypto wallet passwords into sheets of metal, so that they never lose them. And there was a surf school there that allowed young people to make money from offering surf lessons to rich people in Cape Town. And they sort of set them up saying, oh no, you have to be Bitcoin only, so you only accept Bitcoin. And these people, there's no shops that accept Bitcoin there. You know, it's fully sort of giving them this sort of you know, financial literacy training in reverse, where they're just teaching them utter nonsense in order to just sell them on this dream of cryptocurrency without any thought for if it's good for them or not. The whole purpose is to onboard as many suckers as possible, and they tend to be the most poorest and marginalized people that don't have much to lose. So I mean, yeah, I mean, Muhammad Yunus kicked it off. Bitcoiners have come out with the same neoliberal dream, but using a blockchain this time. And yeah, there's loads of stories where this has ended terribly for the most poorest people, from West Africa to Cape Town and everywhere else.
So just for me, I just really the last point I wanted you to speak on, and then Geechee, anything else, whatever, it's all good. But you sort of, again, in your conclusion, bring it back to a point that I find very important, that it's beyond the specific claim of a technology or a currency. You do bring it back to this focus of, in this case, capitalism. And you say capitalists are not interested in decentralized and fully automated techno fixes in order to free humanity from toil. For them, decentralization and digital automation are part of the same quest to consolidate power rather than redistribute it, end quote. Could you just maybe elaborate on that and maybe even talk about, I think one of the examples you used was, I forgot now, was it McDonald's even that automated and then fired everybody to sort of make this point that this is the world that they're looking for: more control, more technological control, more centralized, accumulated wealth for themselves, and for the rest of us, it's I guess do the best you can in a world where there's no employment and no wealth to access.
Yeah. So like when Bitcoin had its initial ascent, I think it was like 2017 when a lot of these crypto markets just exploded, and then just as quickly there was a rug pull trajectory and all of them just flatlined and stayed that way for years. Like no one was interested in crypto anymore because it was very obvious that it was manipulated markets full of wash trading. And the people who had a big investment in crypto, people like the venture capitalists, Mark Zuckerberg, Andreessen Horowitz, Peter Thiel, Brock Pierce, all of these people, they had to come up with some coherent framework which would sort of suggest that there is something here other than just a total scam. So they came up with this Web3 idea. So this sort of forces us to think about like this sort of this ascendance of the internet in the incremental stages from like Web 1, which was all we could do as normal people was read the internet unless we had a computer science degree. Web 2 allowed us to communicate through platforms like Facebook and Twitter and whatever. And then Web 3 allows us to own our own data and make money from the internet, democratically. And they refer to all of this as sort of decentralization through distributed networks. In reality, it re-centralizes everything under their control. So, I mean, the crypto world is far more centralized than traditional finance, and traditional finance is very centralized. Crypto is far more centralized. There's only 3-4 coders that have like execution rights on the blockchain network, like individuals. There's only like 4 pools of miners on the Bitcoin blockchain. This is exactly, and even the same with Ethereum.
There's only maybe 1 or 2 exchanges that handle all the most of the trading.
Binance does more trades than all the other crypto exchanges put together. I mean, and most of those other smaller exchanges end up using Binance anyway. So I mean, none of this is decentralized at all. The example I used at the beginning and then returned to at the end is the mechanical chess playing Turk. This was not 1770. Wolfgang von Kempelen, his name was. He put together this automaton that could play chess, and it beat Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon Bonaparte and Alexander of Prussia or wherever it was. Everyone thought this is amazing. There's this actual automaton, this sort of non-human that's as better at chess than anyone else on the planet. And about 50, 60 years later, they realized that, or someone at least took a guess that there was a very accomplished chess player underneath the chessboard. So, I think that's how we need to think about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. There's a little man in the box who's pulling all the strings. The automated nature of crypto is just is a lie. And I mean, the example you raised there about McDonald's, we saw recently after COVID, obviously, like there's issues of recruiting people, especially to companies that don't want to pay high wages. And McDonald's have got around this problem, rather than sort of increasing wages and submitting to the interests of unionized workers, have just said, oh, well, let's just have restaurants that accept Bitcoin. There's only a couple of these in like Lausanne and a few other cities in Switzerland, I think. But they're a good example of where they've tried to fully automate the restaurant in order to allow the bosses to accumulate the vast majority of profits without having to share it with anyone else. And that's what we're looking at here. There's no decentralization, there's no distribution. This is about power centralized more and more in already powerful rich people.
So just to contradict us, shout out to B Modular.
Everything Pete said was wrong.
Everything you said, Pete, is wrong, and here's the proof. We got $499.99 sent to us, and look, because it says, while we may have some divergence as far as strategy with crypto, I appreciate all your perspectives on this topic and agree with the underlying premise of your point, EYL fellas. Full transparency, this donation is funded by crypto. So there's the answer to your argument. We just got a sizable super chat from B Modular in dollars, though.
Hey, Pete, do me a favor, Pete. Do me a favor. Say everything you just said over and see if we can get another.
Yeah, say all that again. Maybe we'll drop another. Listen.
I'll completely change my mind if it results in more donations.
There you go. That's the. So listen, Professor Peter Howson, I want to thank you very much for coming through, and I would very much be interested in perhaps even a follow-up conversation at some point, because there's a lot more in the book that I haven't finished reading, and there's really a lot more to digest as well. So I just want to pull this up here and encourage people to get a copy of it themselves. Let them eat crypto, the blockchain scam that's ruining the world. To the point here from M. Adams that we went out and just found a naysayer to confirm our own biases. Journalism, I want to just encourage them, first of all, to remember that we've had debates here. We've had other people's critical views of ourselves. We're about to host a couple people who want to come up here and criticize us in a minute. And to the point of Howson's work here, this is not just a naysayer. This is, as he says himself, someone who was initially a proponent of crypto and through experience and research has performed a bit of journalism and scholarship to correct some of those mistakes. So in the opposite of what Adams is saying of us, we have done what most people do not do, and certainly what most crypto defenders do not do, which is to invite criticism, actually do some deep dive study, and invite those who have done the same to talk with us. So Dr. Howson, appreciate your time and your work, and very much look forward, as I said, to building some more at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And sorry about cutting out. I mean, just on that, if I may,
sure,
just 20 seconds. But I mean, you know, so many people I spoke to in the making of this book were techie people, and they all said from the outset, you know, that this technology is far more limited than what people think. And actually, the people who are real strong proponents of this stuff are not techie people. They're there for the politics. And I think, you know, I've come at this from a techie perspective, and, you know, I've been found to be wrong. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I would love to continue this conversation. It'd be good. I'll make sure I've got a good internet next time. But
no, we will, and definitely can read some more. No, and thank you very much, and take good care, Pete Howson. Again, we'll make sure the link to where people can find the book is in the show description. But thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us.